The Travels and Adventures of Little Baron Trump and His Wonderful Dog Bulger. Chapter 9, Part 3. The round bodies broke in upon me with such dismal groans and cries that I stood as if rooted to the earth. Ah, thought I, they too felt the terrible blows of that storm demon which so nearly beat out the life from mine and from Bulger's bodies. Waving my hand as a signal for silence, I proceeded. I bow before the will of thy spherical majesty, whatever it may be. At the same time, I would beg to call the attention of your imperial roundness to the fact that in the systems of laws of all the nations of the globe, a man may not be held responsible for an act which he is made to commit by a force or strength greater than his own. I saw that my flattery was telling upon King Bagogo, so I proceeded to make a still further application of the same remedy. However, most royal globe and perfect sphere of strength and beauty, if in thy great wisdom thou dost decide that we must die, crushed beneath the weight of thy people's body, so be it. Great ball-shaped monarch, I am but a bit and shred of humanity, and how may I dare to oppose the will of your right royal spherosity? King Bagogo smiled till his huge double teeth could be seen glittering in his cavernous mouth, like white rocks in a half-lighted pit, and his body swayed from one side to another in his gigantic glee. "Send for the royal princess," he roared. In a few seconds, in answer to his command, a round body came rolling across the plain with the swiftness of the wind. The crowd of retainers fell back, and the newcomer arrested her flight by the side of King Bagogo. I could not see that she was a bit more beautiful than those around her, although she was a royal princess. True, she was a globe of smaller girth, her face was somewhat less repellent, and beneath the long and heavy fringes of lashes, I caught glimpses of a pair of good-natured, roguish eyes. And my perfect knowledge of human and brute nature told me at a glance that if I could but gain the goodwill of that strange being, Bulger and I would be safe. "My dear round papa," cried Rolla Bola, for such proved to be her name. "Where did those funny things come from? Are they really alive? Won't they bite or sting? What do they eat? What shall I keep them in? Will you make me a cage for them? Oh, I am so glad." And she bounded about, now this way, now that, now into the air like an animated rubber ball, drumming like a partridge all the while. Behold us, then, Bulger and me, prisoners in the land of the round bodies, with the Princess Rolla Bola as our keeper. Hope sank low within our poor hearts. I dared not breathe a word in opposition to the will of King Bagogo or the caprice of Rolla Bola, lest the order should be revoked. At least in the keeping of the Princess Rolla Bola, we would be more likely to receive gentle treatment. In what was almost a matter of life and death, we should have great chances of making our escape from the island of King Bagogo. We were commanded to follow the princess. As Bulger and I started after Rolla Bola, with a brisk gait, the very clouds fairly snapped asunder, so great was the shout of laughter which the round bodies sent up. Seemingly, it had not occurred to them until that moment how ridiculously different our mode of locomotion was from theirs. "Look, look, O king!" they cried. "He can neither roll nor hop. See how he edges along, leaning first on one foot and then on the other. He walks on his toenails. Mark his companion, too. What monsters of clumsiness! How they rock and wobble! Why doth he not spring? Why doth he pound the earth as if he were beating flax? To all this mocking and jeering, Bulger and I turned a deaf ear, following our mistress, who, ever and anon, turned her soft, black, mischievous eyes encouragingly upon us as her head came uppermost. Imagine our surprise when Rolla Bola halted at the beginning of a path having a gentle descent and said, "This is the entrance to the royal habitation. Follow me and fear nothing." In a few moments, we found ourselves in the outer room of a vast underground dwelling, consisting of corridors, chambers, dormitories, banquet halls, and arenas. All the habitations of the round bodies are subterranean. Why? This you shall know anon. Bulger and I were conducted to a very pleasant quarters, well lighted, as were all the rooms of the palace, by means of vast slabs of rock crystal, of which the roof was made, by a square or lobob, as he was called in the language of the round bodies, that is, one not perfectly round in form, and hence degraded to the position of serving man. Doubtless, long before this, the reader has grown impatient at my silence concerning the strange beings among whom Bulger and I now found ourselves prisoners. Who were the round bodies? Know then, gentle reader, that they were, mark well my words, the sole living creatures on the island of Gudgula, upon which a strange fate had cast us. Whether or not any other beings had ever inhabited the island was unknown to them. I found upon conversing with their learned men that there was a legend in existence among them, dim and shadowy in its details from the long flight of centuries that it had come down through, that many thousands of years ago they had been quite like human beings who walk upright, with bodies almost, if not quite, as long as mine, but that owing to the unvarying recurrence of terrible storms, of wind, rain, hail, and snow, accompanied by the bursting of deafening thunderbolts, in fact, such as I had experienced, which swept over the island 12 times in the year, coming and going with regularity as astonishing as their force is terrific, everything upright had long ago been swept from the land. That their ancestors, yielding to the irresistible forces of nature, had gradually bent their bodies before these resistless winds until even the time when they walked upright had been forgotten. This was but the first change wrought by the forces which surrounded them. When overtaken by these wild winds, they soon learned that their only safety lay in rolling themselves up as much into the shape of balls as possible, so that the tornado would be powerless to pick them up and hurl them to destruction. Another transformation now began to make itself apparent. Their bodies, as centuries came and went, little by little, took on the rounded form they then had. Still clinging to the desperate chance for life on these storm-swept plains, they drew down their hands and pressed in their limbs until these had made recesses for them. As some tortoises draw their legs so closely to their bodies that the eye fails to distinguish even the outline of the limb. The last change that came upon these globe-shaped people was a very natural one. Their arms took on a greater development of superhuman strength, while their legs grew shorter and shorter, until they consisted of little more than two broad, flexible feet, which they made use of mainly to propel their round bodies like huge balls across the vast plains of their island home. Now, while they still dread the terrible blast, yet it is rather an inherited fear, for at last they have become the true children of the gale. If it should happen to blow in the direction of their homes, they simply allow it to help them on their way by rolling them across the plain. While now and then a lobo or square round body, so to speak, would be blown into the ocean, yet for nearly a century Not a single genuine round body had been caught up in the pitiless blast. As well might the wind attempt to pick up the round stones of the ocean strand. One of the things which early attracted my attention to King Bogogo's palace was the hangings, apparently of the softest leather, worked in mosaic patterns of transcendent beauty. Imagine my surprise when told by the gentle Princess Rollo that they were simply the natural leaves from the various trees growing in the island, untouched by dye or stain of any kind. They were so tough that my strength sufficed not to tear one in two. Noticing my wide opened eyes turned inquiringly upon her, the gentle Rollo cried out with a soft, low gurgle, "Go into the royal garden, Tutulo. That is little Flute Man, and see for thyself." Now, for the first, I learned the secret of the presence of such beautiful trees and shrubs upon this storm-swept land. Every leaf was as thick and as strong as leather, and the trunks and boughs were exactly of the nature of India rubber, so that with a small bit which I brought home with me in one of my pockets, I could erase pencil marks with the greatest ease. To such foliage as this, a tornado had no terrors. When the storm struck these trees, they went to the ground until it had spent its fury. In a few hours, the tropical sun lifted them again, and the beauty of their foliage was quite unharmed. To return to the poor Princess Rollo. Bulger began to fret and worry beneath the strain of our captivity. I was constantly on the alert for a chance to escape, but none offered. In fact, we were, I began to fear, prisoners for life. True, it was a pleasant captivity, for the gentle Rollo almost killed us with dainty feeding, and our only toil was dancing, singing, and capering for her amusement. Night and day, the sole gateway of the royal habitation was guarded by a triple row of round-bodied sentinels, so fierce-visaged, so mighty-handed, that my heart grew sick as I gazed upon them. To add to my despair, I now made a discovery which seemed to seal my fate forever. The Princess Rollo had become enamored of me. What to me at first had seemed but a playful trick, to wit, her pinching my little toe ever and anon, had, as I was casually informed by one of the learned round-bodies in the course of discussion with him, a terrible significance. It was a solemn declaration of love. Oh, miserable me! And a declaration, too, which, coming from a woman to a man, was certain sure inevitable death to ignore. And yet, I might be saved. For the custom, made sacred by the observance of long ages, required the man to pursue the woman who pretended to be frightened and extremely solicitous of escaping him, and while revolving with the same velocity as she, to pinch her little toe in return. This ended the matter. The couple was now betrothed. And we'll pause here, and we'll continue with this story in the next video. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Thanks for watching. I love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.